Welcome to this PinvoiceR training session. In this session we're going to look at the new employee screen. It has in fact been in preview for a little while, but we've made it the standard screen now. And I'll show you later in the video, but you can have a look at the old one still if you need to, but it's mainly been left there for the moment so people can get used to the screen and if they need to find information on it. There is another video that goes through the Australian version. Obviously, employment in Australia and New Zealand is slightly different, so hence each of these employee screens are a little bit different from each other. So just to explain, we're on the Employee Details tab. It's reasonably straightforward, and obviously you can see the information for this test record in the system here. And you know, it ranges from anything from personal details, tax, bank, KiwiSaver, etc. And as you'd appreciate, most of that information is entered through an onboarding process. So obviously you can edit it here, but it's rare that you have to manually enter a record from scratch in terms of this. It will come from an onboarding session in Recruit Online or other front-end systems. So just having a look at here, some of the things that just to explain. So if I have a look at under system settings, we're showing the entity. So many of our clients have multiple entities, multiple businesses, and obviously using the one PinvoiceR system. And I guess they can have a scenario where a particular employee could work for one of their entities and then move to another, etc. And obviously for each one of those employee, the same person, but each one of those instances, there'd be a separate record. So you can quickly see, if there were two of these example records and it's the same person, you'd know which one of your entities for that particular record you're looking at, and obviously the division and that kind of stuff. We show the employee ID, so that's a PinvoiceR ID, and obviously the external, so typically that's the Recruit Online ID or other front-end system. And we also show those at the top, so quite often you want to know an employee ID or a front-end a Recruit Online type ID. You can quickly see it up here as well. And some of our clients have additional systems they want to connect to PinvoiceR and therefore need other IDs to map to, and so there's a second ID in that instance that can be shown there. In looking at the section where you've got tax, bank, KiwiSaver, etc., it also does some functionality. It will validate an IRD number based on the algorithm there, similarly with the bank details, and functionality to change KiwiSaver and opt out. It's just from that menu there, and a matter of clicking on that link to do that. There's hoverovers to show you what each of these KiwiSaver statuses mean, similarly with things like the tax codes, what each of those tax codes translate to. The sticky note section, not to be confused with the notes section, it's just really a high level sticky note area. So you might have a note that anybody wants to see when they look in a record, test, something like that. It gets put in there, and that note would be there, and there's nothing about who made it, when it was made, or that kind of stuff. Whereas notes in the notes section will have the user and the test and the time, the note itself, and the actual time date stamp. And if you make another one, they sort of cascade in the most recent at the top. Other aspects too, so you'll see, and obviously leave in New Zealand is a little bit different to elsewhere, but you can see information around leave, and obviously this is just an overview of the employee record rather than going into details about leave. So have a look at other videos on understanding annual leave and public holidays and all of those sort of things. Other things on here, so deductions, none in this particular record, and we're going to do another video on deductions, but obviously if I wanted a new deduction or a new addition, I can put those in here, and you'll see any active ones that sit there, and equally any history of any deductions that have happened as the pays have been processed for that particular employee would sit there. And other aspects, so we'll go through that in due course. And documents, obviously any documents that you want to store against that particular record for that employee would sit in there, and you can drag and drop and do that there. So it's all reasonably straightforward there. Other things that you're used to seeing around, let's say, pay slips, etc., like that, all sit under the employee section. So if I want to see someone's pay slips or other reports, leave settings, etc., they're all available from that menu there, as a matter of clicking through and using those as normal. The other thing here, there's some functionality across here. So in no particular order, if we're talking about making somebody inactive, you would click on this button here, go deactivate, set a finish date, and that would drive that process, and that person would become deactivated or inactive. In this particular employee test record, they're accruing leave. Obviously, you have some instances where you want to pay out leave as they go, obviously depending on the particular circumstances. If I wanted to switch that across, I would just do that and then click on that link there, and it would switch it from accruing leave to paying it out as they are working. And there's another setting, so if you have a employee who's internal, so that might be casual or permanent, if you want to make them internal, so they're not visible to people who can't see internal employees, it's a matter of clicking on there and you would set them to internal, and the opposite to set them back. Editing, obviously much the same way. You've got all of the information. I can cascade or open up the different sections that I need in there, so including things such as custom fields for clients that use custom fields on particular records, but obviously each of the settings that you would have. And when you go to apply, so some of these things are mandatory, so for example date of birth would be a mandatory field. When I apply changes, it's going to anything that's not been set, it would come up with a warning, and sometimes that warning is going to be a hard block, like a date of birth, or something where it's not going to stop the process, but there's not a postcode set, for example. Again, not everybody puts postcodes in, but it's just a warning, so it's just identifying some of the things that are mandatory and some of the things that would be preferred to be in there or are missing, so to speak. So I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of the screen. If you do need to look at the old screen, then it's just a matter of under the employee here, going to the old employee screen. We'll leave that up for a little while, but realistically, it's fairly easy to get used to this particular layout. And once you have, probably little need to go and have a look at the old one. So if you have any questions, obviously talk to us and support and let us know. Thank you.